Hi guys, and welcome to Last Light Radio channel. Tonight we step into the cold, uneasy opening of 1861 when the United States seems to creak in the dark like an old house before a storm. What does it feel like to wake each morning in a country arguing over your body, your labour, your future, and even your right to belong to yourself? What is it like when the people making speeches in bright chambers speak of liberty, while millions of black Americans live under chains, threats, laws, and customs designed to deny it? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while you're getting comfortable, comment below with your location and local time. Now, dim the lights, and let the year 1861 gather around you slowly. You begin in winter air that bites at your skin. The ground is hard in many places, damp in others, and the sky often hangs low and pale. Smoke drifts from chimneys where there are chimneys to drift from, and from rougher fires where there are not, in towns, in farmyards, on plantations, near docks, beside muddy roads. Black Americans begin the year with lives shaped by forces much larger than any single household. The country is splitting apart. South Carolina has already left the Union. Other southern states are following. White men argue over state rights, property, and power, using polished words for ugly realities. At the heart of the crisis sits slavery, huge and heavy, like a stone no speech can hide. For nearly 4 million enslaved black Americans in 1861, the new year does not arrive as a fresh page. It arrives as work before dawn. It arrives as the creak of a door, the call of an overseer, the cough of a child sleeping on a pallet, the smell of ash, salt pork, damp wool, and earth turned by bare or aching hands. Your body belongs, in law, to someone else. That fact shapes everything. It decides where you stand, where you walk, whom you marry if you're allowed, whether your children stay beside you, how loudly you speak, and how carefully you listen. And you listen constantly. That is one of the first truths of this world. You listen for footsteps. You listen for mood. You listen for scraps of talk passing between white people who often assume you do not fully understand what they are saying. A mistake on their part, obviously. You listen for rumours of sale, rumours of violence, rumours of masters joining militias, rumours of war, rumours of freedom. The nation is talking too loudly now for those sounds not to reach you somehow, even where newspapers are forbidden to enslaved people, even where letters are kept out of reach. News travels. It moves by whispers, by glances, by chance overheard sentences, by free black sailors at a dock, by a preacher on the road, by a house servant who catches one line and carries it carefully back. The South in 1861 is not one single place. Virginia differs from Louisiana. A small farm differs from a vast cotton plantation. Charleston differs from a Mississippi River county. Urban slavery differs from plantation slavery. Skilled labour differs from gang labour in the fields. Yet a common structure remains. Black life in the South exists under surveillance and coercion, backed by law and violence. Patrols roam. Passes are demanded. Reading may be forbidden. Meetings are watched. Punishments hang in the air even when no blow falls that day. You feel the pressure of a system meant not only to control labour, but to crush unpredictability itself. Still, daily life is not only terror, that would be too simple. And history is rarely simple. Between labour and threat, people build families, jokes, songs, recipes, beliefs, and private habits of tenderness. A mother smooths a child's hair with careful fingers. A man repairs a shoe by firelight. Someone hums low while stirring cornmeal mush. A couple steal a few minutes together after dark. A grandmother passes on names, warnings, and stories that official America would rather bury. Even in bondage, people create human worlds inside a system designed to deny their humanity. That is not freedom. Not even close. But it is survival with memory attached. Free black Americans begin 1861 in a different, yet still unstable, reality. In northern cities such as Philadelphia, Boston, New York, and Cincinnati, free black communities have churches, benevolent societies, businesses, schools, newspapers, and political voices. In southern cities like New Orleans, Baltimore, and Richmond, some free black people also live in established communities, though always under tightening pressure. Freedom papers may protect you one day and fail you the next if a hostile official, employer, or stranger decides otherwise. Kidnapping remains a real danger. Racism does not politely stop at the Mason-Dixon line. It simply changes costume. If you are free, you may still be barred from voting, excluded from many jobs, shoved into segregated spaces, insulted in the street, or denied equal schooling. You might work as a carpenter, washerwoman, teacher, barber, sailor, cook, labourer, or domestic servant. You may own property, you may save money. You may also watch white employers choose less qualified white workers over you with astonishing confidence. Some northern white Americans oppose slavery. Some oppose slavery and also oppose black equality. A neat little contradiction, quite popular at the time. As 1861 opens, many black Americans understand the stakes of the national crisis more clearly than the politicians claiming to lead it. Enslaved people know that secession is not an abstract constitutional debate. It is an effort by slave-holding states to secure and expand human bondage. Free black activists know this too. Black newspapers and speakers have warned for years that the slave power, as many called it, seeks dominance over national life. The election of Abraham Lincoln in November 1860 has triggered secession, but Lincoln himself has not entered office promising immediate abolition where slavery already exists. He opposes the spread of slavery into the territories, yet he moves cautiously, legally, politically. For black Americans facing daily danger, caution can feel very thin indeed, so you inhabit a strange, suspended moment. The old order is cracking but not yet falling. Possibility has appeared, but it is vague and risky. Fear remains more reliable than hope, because fear has already proven itself. In the quarters of a plantation, night sounds settle around you. A pot lid clinks. Someone coughs behind a wall of rough boards. Wind presses through gaps. The smell of pine smoke and worn cloth lingers. Feet ache from cotton rows, tobacco fields, rice swamps, sugar work, livestock tending, laundry, hauling, digging, or endless domestic service. Hands are split, shoulders sore, backs stiff, yet minds remain active. People measure the behaviour of owners. Some masters are anxious now, some are angry, some are excited by secession and talk grandly of honour while depending completely on stolen labour to button their coats and bring their breakfast. History does enjoy irony. There are enslaved men hired out in towns who hear political arguments in taverns and workshops. There are enslaved women in kitchens who hear family debates while pretending not to notice. There are coachmen, dock workers, blacksmiths, laundresses, seamstresses, nurses, and boatmen moving along channels of information invisible to those who imagine themselves fully in control. A quirky detail from the era survives in scattered accounts in some places, enslaved and free. Black people gathered news from train depots and telegraph offices, not by reading the messages directly, but by observing the rush, tone, and unusual movement of white men around them. When people suddenly ran, argued, or crowded a bulletin board, news had landed. Even silence could mean something. Historians still argue over exactly how much many enslaved communities understood about national politics in early 1861 because evidence is uneven and often filtered through white observers. But there is little doubt that many grasped the central point. Powerful white people were fighting over slavery's future, and that fight might open cracks in the wall. Religion is part of the atmosphere too, in brush arbours, praise houses, formal churches, or whispered prayer beside a bed. Black Americans interpret events through faith as well as politics. Biblical stories carry special power. Exodus matters. Deliverance matters. Judgment matters. A white minister may preach obedience from one passage, while black listeners carry another passage quietly in the heart. Spiritual life offers comfort, meaning, coded language, and community. The sound of a low hymn at night can hold sorrow and stubbornness at once. It can feel like breath made visible. Children absorb the world around them with painful speed. A child may not know the full map of national events, yet can read tension in adult faces, hear changes in routine, and notice when strangers ride in more often than usual. Some children rise before light to fetch water or tend fires. Some are sent on errands. Some work in fields. Some serve in the big house. Childhood exists, but under pressure. Play may flicker between duties, quick and improvised, using a stick, a rag doll, a song, a game of chase on packed ground. Then someone calls, and the moment is over. Food tells its own story. The meals of enslaved people vary by region and owner, but often rely on cornmeal, pork, molasses, greens, sweet potatoes, peas, or whatever can be grown, traded, hunted, fished, or secretly supplemented. Gardens can be precious. So can a chicken, a trapped rabbit, a handful of berries, an onion, a bit of fish from a creek. The smell of boiling greens or roasting corn can bring comfort, but it also reminds you how much depends on tiny margins. Hunger is never far away. Clothing is usually coarse and limited. Wool scratches, shoes pinch when there are shoes, bare feet meet mud in spring, dust in summer, frozen ground in winter. Touch matters in such a world. The rough weave of work clothes, the warmth of a shared blanket, the sting of cold water, the slippery handle of a bucket, the splinter in a fence rail, the steady grip of another hand during prayer. History can seem grand from a distance, all flags and speeches. Up close, it is cloth against skin and breath in cold air. Meanwhile, free black thinkers and activists continue to write, organize, and speak. Frederick Douglass, one of the era's most powerful voices, argues with urgency that the war crisis must become a struggle against slavery itself. Black conventions and community meetings have long called for citizenship, education, self-defense, legal rights, and the destruction of slavery. Women are central in this labor, though the record too often pushes them to the edges. Teachers, fundraisers, church leaders, writers, mothers, seamstresses, and organizers keep communities functioning. Their work is practical and political at once. They feed people, shelter people, teach people, and remind people that dignity is not granted by white approval. There is also a persistent uncertainty in early 1861 about what war, if it comes, will actually mean for black Americans. Will enslaved people be moved deeper south? Will patrols become harsher? Will chaos create chances to escape? Will the Union fight only to restore itself? Leaving slavery intact, will white Northerners sacrifice black freedom for compromise yet again? Many have reason to suspect they might. The nation has done it before. And still, the air feels charged. In port cities, you smell tar, salt water, fish, rope, horses, tobacco, and refuse. Ships come and go with goods built from enslaved labour. Cotton ties American slavery to world markets, to British mills, to northern finance, to global appetite. The entire system is profitable, efficient in its cruelty, and deeply entangled. That is one mainstream fact no sleepy lost cause story can honestly erase. Slavery in 1861 is not fading naturally like an old custom. It is economically significant, politically defended, and violently maintained. Yet under that heavy structure, countless private calculations are underway. Some enslaved people consider escape. Some decide waiting is safer. Some test boundaries in small ways, slowing work, feigning illness, protecting family, concealing knowledge. Some free black people gather resources and strengthen institutions. Some watch white America with a tired expression history has earned. Because when white politicians announce that they are entering a great moral age, a sensible person might reasonably ask whether they plan to include black people this time. As the weeks move towards spring, the sense of impending collision deepens. Newspapers rage, militias drill, secession conventions meet. Lincoln prepares to take office in March. Black Americans do not control these official stages, but they read the danger and possibility in them with intense clarity. Across farms, cities, alleys, churches, kitchens, cabins, workshops, and roads, a people placed at the centre of the national crisis, yet denied power over it. Prepare inwardly for whatever comes. You stand there in the cold beginning of 1861 in a land full of noise and restraint, prayer and calculation, fatigue and alertness. The smoke stings your nose. The morning wind touches your face. Somewhere a wagon rattles. Somewhere a bell rings. Somewhere voices drop to a whisper as someone mentions war. And beneath it all lives one immense truth, steady as a drumbeat in the dark. Black Americans enter this year carrying grief, endurance, intelligence, fear, and a sharpened sense that the country is moving toward a reckoning, whether it knows it or not. Morning begins in darkness, not because the sun has forgotten you, but because labour starts before light has any say in the matter. You wake to the scrape of movement, the rustle of straw, the soft groan of tired bodies rising from rough bedding. Air sits cold against your face. Smoke from last night's fire still clings to the room, mixed with the smell of damp wood, old cloth, and human breath. Somewhere nearby, a baby fusses. Someone clears a throat. Outside, a rooster sounds far too cheerful for the hour. The day has already made its demands. If you are enslaved in the South in 1861, your life is measured less by calendars than by orders, seasons, and the needs of the people who claim to own you. Cotton, tobacco, rice, sugar, corn, livestock, brickmaking, blacksmithing, cooking, childcare, carpentry, washing, spinning, hauling, cleaning, mending. The work changes by region and setting, but the logic remains the same. Your body is expected to produce value from sunrise to dusk, and often beyond. Even rest can feel borrowed. On a large plantation, the workday may begin with a horn, a bell, or the voice of a driver calling people into motion. The ground can be slick with dew. Mud clings to ankles. In colder months, fingers go stiff before they warm. In hotter months, the heat rises early and settles like a heavy cloth across the back of your neck. Tools feel familiar in the hand, not because they are beloved, but because repetition makes strangers of nothing. Hoe handles polish under use. Buckets leave grooves in the fingers. Baskets pull at shoulders. You learn the exact texture of a day's burden. Field labour is relentless. In cotton country, rows stretch outward with a kind of cruel patience, asking to be chopped, weeded, picked, or cleared. In tobacco regions, plants demand careful handling, topping, cutting, hanging, curing. Rice work can be especially punishing, with wet ground, insects, and long exposure to water. Sugar labour in Louisiana is infamous for its intensity, especially during harvest and processing, when grinding and boiling can continue deep into the night. Historians generally agree that sugar plantations were among the harshest labour regimes in the South. You do not need a historian to tell you that exhaustion has its own accent. The gang labour system on many plantations forces groups to work together under close supervision. Pace is set from above, and no one is supposed to drift behind. The driver watches, the overseer watches, the owner may appear unexpectedly, performing his own version of concern while calculating output in his head. A slower worker can bring punishment. So can talking too much, pausing too long, or looking insufficiently obedient. The whole arrangement depends on pressure, and pressure is applied daily, sometimes with a shout, sometimes with a threat, sometimes with the knowledge that violence is always near enough to be used. Not every enslaved person works in the fields, in towns and houses. Labour takes different shapes and its own forms of strain. If you are in domestic service, your work begins before the household stirs and ends after it settles. You clean grates, carry water, sweep floors, wash garments, iron linen, scrub dishes, prepare food, tend children, answer bells, and move quietly through rooms arranged for someone else's comfort. The smell of starch, hot iron, yeast, roasting meat, soap, and lamp oil fills the day. You're required to be present and unnoticed at once. A neat little impossibility. Household labour can look easier from a distance, especially to those imagining shade carpets and leftovers. In truth, it often involves constant surveillance, emotional strain, and intimate exposure to the moods and secrets of the white family. You may be blamed for a misplaced object, punished for a child's tantrum, or expected to endure insults with a calm face. You may hear arguments over money, marriage, politics, and secession while pouring coffee. You may hear your own life discussed as property value. That kind of closeness does not soften bondage. It simply places it indoors. Skilled enslaved labourers occupy another complicated position. Blacksmiths, carpenters, coopers, masons, seamstresses, boatmen, and mill workers may have more mobility, more contact with the wider world, and sometimes access to wages, or at least to the fiction of wages routed through an owner. Their skills can make them valuable in ways that slightly expand daily room for manoeuvre. Slightly? A skilled enslaved carpenter might travel between jobs. A hired-out artisan might meet free black workers, hear news, trade quietly, or save tiny sums. Yet skill does not cancel danger. In some ways it increases it, because value invites tighter control. Children work too. That is one of the colder truths of the system. A small child may begin with errands, carrying water, minding infants, picking up chips for kindling, driving birds from crops, or helping in kitchens and yards. As children grow, tasks increase. By adolescence, many are doing adult labour or something close to it. Their bodies are still forming, but slavery has no interest in healthy development beyond usefulness. Play happens in scraps of time, a song while fetching wood, a game with pebbles, a chase across packed dirt before someone calls them back. Childhood is squeezed into corners. Food comes with routine and uncertainty. Some enslaved people receive weekly rations of cornmeal, pork, molasses, or flour. Others rely more heavily on garden plots, fishing, trapping, gathering, or informal trade to supplement what owners provide. The taste of food can be plain, smoky, salty, filling, or never quite enough. Cornbread cooked on a hearthstone, greens simmered in a pot, a sweet potato tucked in coals, a spoonful of molasses when luck or negotiation allows it. The smell of supper can bring a brief sense of ease, but hunger is a steady companion in many places. It teaches economy. It sharpens attention. Clothing is distributed according to stinginess and season. Coarse shirts, rough trousers, plain dresses, headcloths, worn jackets, heavy shoes that may fit poorly or arrive late, fabric scratches, seams rub. Winter winds find every weak point. In summer, sweat soaks everything. Laundry is labour in itself, done with water hauled by hand, soap made or stretched, and endless scrubbing against board and knuckle. Touch becomes memory, the rasp of homespun cloth, the ache of swollen feet, the relief of warmth near a fire. Shelter varies widely, but comfort is rarely the point. Cabins on plantations may be built of logs, boards, brick, or a miserable combination of patch and hope. Some are crowded, some leaking, some smoky, some relatively sturdy by the low standards imposed upon them. Beds may be simple frames, pallets, or straw ticks. A few treasured possessions might sit on a shelf or in a box if there is a shelf or a box to be had. A bowl, a kettle, a blanket, a Bible page, a ribbon, a pipe, a carved keepsake, a scrap of paper with a name. Objects matter when law says you own almost nothing. Family life survives within brutal constraints. Marriage among enslaved people is often recognized by the community rather than protected by law. A husband and wife may live on different plantations and see one another only on passes, Sundays, or stolen evenings. Parents know that children can be sold. Children know that adults can disappear. The domestic slave trade remains active in 1861, carrying people from the Upper South to the Deep South in numbers that have scarred generations. One mainstream fact bears repeating in spirit. If not as slogan, slavery is not only forced labour, it is organised theft of kinship. And yet families form with extraordinary care. Parents teach manners, warnings, practical skills, songs, prayers, and the names of relatives across distance. A woman may braid a daughter's hair with fingers both gentle and efficient. A father may carve a toy from scrap wood after dark. Grandparents often hold family memory, recalling births, deaths, marriages, old places, older names. They keep human continuity alive in a system designed to break it into saleable units. A child learns not just who loves them, but how to survive a world that denies that love legal standing. Sundays and evenings can offer partial breathing room, though never complete freedom. Some owners allow garden tending, visits, or worship. Some do not. In spaces away from direct white supervision, enslaved people create social worlds rich with music, courtship, storytelling, jokes, dance, and mutual aid. The sound of clapping hands, quiet laughter, a fiddle, or a low spiritual can change the feel of night entirely. For a little while, sorrow loosens its collar. People speak more fully, faces open, the dark can feel protective. Religion threads through this life in many forms. Some enslaved people attend white supervised services where obedience is heavily emphasized. Others gather in independent black congregations where allowed. Many join hidden meetings in woods, cabins, or ravines, places chosen for privacy and trust. Prayer may be whispered, sung, cried, or held in silence. Biblical stories of bondage and deliverance carry power because they are not abstract. Moses is not merely theology. He is possibility, dressed as memory. A quirky tidbit from the era appears in a number of recollections in some secret meetings. A pot or kettle was turned upside down near the door to muffle sound and catch voices, a practical little trick against listening ears. Violence structures everything, even when it is not visible in every hour. The lash exists not only as a physical instrument, but as a policy of anticipation. People work, move, and speak, knowing punishment may follow disobedience, complaint, escape attempts, broken tools, missed quotas, or sometimes no clear offence at all. Sexual exploitation of enslaved women is widespread, though records often hide it behind silence or euphemism. Men too are vulnerable to bodily violation, humiliation, and coercion. The law offers little protection because the law is built to defend owners' claims, not enslaved people's personhood. That is the architecture of the system. Historians still debate how much variation in treatment should shape our understanding of slavery's daily reality, because first-hand accounts show a range of experiences. Some owners prided themselves on paternal image, others on raw discipline, many on both, depending on audience. But the central fact remains plain. Any arrangement resting on ownership of human beings is violent by nature, even when wrapped in softer language. A cage with curtains is still a cage. By 1861, many enslaved Southerners are also navigating a growing atmosphere of political tension. White conversations have become sharper, secession conventions, militia drilling, and talk of Lincoln reach plantations and towns through overheard speech and altered routines. Owners worry about loyalty. Patrols may become more vigilant. Rumours move with startling speed. Some say war will change everything. Some say nothing will change. Some say masters will flee. Some say they will sell people south before risk grows. The uncertainty is its own burden. A mind can wear itself thin trying to prepare for futures that have not yet chosen a shape. Women often carry layers of labour invisible to the official record. Beyond fieldwork or domestic duties, they patch clothes, tend children, nurse the sick, cook late meals, soothe frightened family members, and negotiate the emotional survival of households under pressure. Men may be expected to perform heavy labour, craft work, hauling, and dangerous tasks. But their role as protectors is complicated by the cruel fact that legal power sits elsewhere. Neither women nor men can reliably shield loved ones from sale or punishment. That helplessness cuts deep. You see it in how people look at one another when hooves approach on the road. The sensory world of the plantation south is constant and vivid. Cicadas rise in heat, frogs call from wet ground, dogs bark at strangers, harness chains clink, wagons groan, kettles hiss, axes bite into wood, cotton leaves brush against wrists, smoke stings the eyes, sweat salts the lips, mosquitoes whine near ears, sugar syrup smells thick and almost sickly sweet near boiling houses. Fresh split pine smells clean for a moment before the day turns harsh again. These details stay with you because they are the texture of lived time. Resistance lives inside this world, though it does not always look dramatic. Someone breaks a tool and shrugs innocence. Someone slows the pace just enough to preserve strength. Someone teaches a child letters in secret. Someone hides food, lies to protect another person, slips away to visit a spouse without permission, or keeps silent when white authorities demand names. Some run, some fight, some endure with deliberate stubbornness that owners mistake for compliance. Survival itself can become an act of refusal when the entire system expects your spirit to flatten. What was it like then? For Black Americans bound in the South at the start of the Civil War, it was waking tired and sleeping wary. It was labour under watchful eyes. It was family made precious by danger. It was prayer mixed with planning. It was hunger, skill, tenderness, fear, and calculation all sharing the same narrow room. It was knowing that your life was treated as property while feeling, every day, the full human truth of your own mind, your own body, your own longing. And in that hard world, under winter sky or summer blaze, you kept living anyway, quietly, cleverly, stubbornly, which, if you think about it, is already a kind of victory. Freedom, in 1861, is not a soft chair by the fire. It is not a settled feeling. It is not even always safe to say out loud. For free Black Americans at the start of the Civil War, freedom is often a paper folded carefully into a pocket, a name entered in a register, a witness who knows your face, a church community that can vouch for you, a job that might disappear without warning, and a constant awareness that the nation around you still doubts your place in it. You wake without an owner. Yes, that matters enormously, but you do not wake inside equality. The day begins in a city street, perhaps in Philadelphia, Baltimore, Boston, New York, Cincinnati, or New Orleans. The sounds are different from plantation mornings. Wheels rattle over cobbles, hooves strike sharp rhythms, vendors call, dock workers shout across water, bells ring from churches and public buildings, coal smoke mixes with horse manure, river damp, kitchen grease, and the smell of bread from a nearby bakery. You feel the press of other lives close around you. People hurry to workshops, markets, washhouses, schools, docks, and homes. The city offers motion, possibility, and danger in the same breath. If you are free and black, one of the first things you learn is to carry proof where proof is required. Freedom papers can be your shield, thin as it is. In some places you keep them close to your body, protected from rain, theft, and wear. The paper itself can feel fragile, a poor little guardian against a world eager to question you. Ink fades, corners fray, officials squint. A document can save you in one encounter and fail you in the next if the person examining it is cruel, drunk, lazy, or simply determined to make your life harder. Bureaucracy, even then, had a real talent for drama. In slave states, free black life lives under especially sharp scrutiny. Curfews, registration laws, movement restrictions, licensing rules, and threats of expulsion vary by place. But the pressure is real. A free black person in Baltimore or New Orleans may have family, work, and long-standing community roots, yet still move through a legal world designed to remind them that white authorities can tighten the screws whenever they please. In many southern places, legislatures have spent decades making freedom harder to hold, harder to prove, and harder to pass on securely. The very existence of free black communities unsettles a slave society, because their lives contradict its favourite lie. In the North, the constraints look different, though they remain sharp enough. You may be legally free and still denied the vote in many states. You may be excluded from juries, public accommodations, skilled professions, unions, schools, and neighbourhoods. Streetcars can humiliate you. Hotels can refuse you. White workers can resent you. Employers can underpay you. Newspapers can insult you with calm confidence, as if prejudice was simply another form of common sense. Some white Northerners speak against slavery while recoiling from the thought of black neighbours, black voters, or black children in the same classroom. Moral principle, it turns out, can be strangely selective when comfort is involved. Yet free black communities in 1861 are not weak or passive. They are organised, inventive, and deeply rooted. Churches anchor neighbourhoods. Mutual aid societies collect funds for widows, burials, schooling, and emergencies. Black schools, though often underfunded and vulnerable, educate children with seriousness and pride. Newspapers argue, report, persuade, and warn. Barbershops, boarding houses, eating rooms, and small businesses create places where information travels quickly. In homes lit by candles or oil lamps, families read aloud, sew, pray, host meetings, and discuss politics with a clarity that many office holders would find inconvenient. Work shapes daily life. Many free black women labour as washerwomen, cooks, seamstresses, domestic workers, street vendors, teachers, or caretakers. Many free black men work as labourers, sailors, draymen, porters, barbers, carpenters, caterers, blacksmiths, waiters, printers, and hack drivers. Some own shops, some operate boarding houses, some have professional standing as ministers, writers, lecturers, or physicians, though those paths are narrow and steep. The work is often hard, underpaid, and insecure, but it can also provide a measure of independence, rhythm, and reputation. Respectability becomes both shield and burden. You dress carefully when you can. You speak precisely when needed. You manage impressions because the world is eager to misread you. In a washhouse, steam rises thick and damp around the room. Soap bites the skin. Wet fabric grows heavy in the arms. The smell of lye hangs sharp in the air. A woman bends over tubs, wrings cloth, lifts kettles, scrubs collars, and smooths worn garments for households that may barely acknowledge her, except to complain. In a barber shop, razors gleam, towels warm, and politics flow as steadily as lather. In a classroom, chalk dust settles while a teacher holds order among children who know education is precious because so many forces would keep it from them. In each case, labour is never just economic. It is also social navigation. The family life of free black Americans carries both stability and strain. Marriage can be legal in ways denied to the enslaved, yet poverty, illness, discrimination, and the threat of kidnapping still shadow the household. Parents work to create routines that feel safe. Breakfast on a table, however plain, hair braided before school, shoes mended near the stove, evening prayers, lessons repeated, a child sent with instructions about which streets to avoid, which adults to trust, and what to do if stopped by someone asking questions. Freedom requires teaching vigilance early, which is a sad education for any child. Kidnapping is one of the great terrors of the era. Free black people can be seized, especially children and young adults, and sold into slavery through fraud and violence. This danger is not imaginary and not confined to one region. It helps explain why community networks matter so much. Neighbours watch, churches inquire. Employers are expected to know who belongs where. A familiar face missing for too long can set people into motion. A quirky but telling detail from the period appears in local notices and recollections. Some parents taught children exact phrases to repeat about their names, parents, and church affiliation if challenged, almost like a verbal emergency card carried in the mind. The Fugitive Slave Act, passed in 1850, has made life even more precarious for many free black Northerners. Although aimed at escaped enslaved people, its enforcement creates an atmosphere in which black freedom itself can be doubted on sight. Federal commissioners hold great power. Accused people have few protections. Slave catchers and kidnappers exploit the climate. A free black resident of a northern city knows that the line between safety and danger may be as thin as a hostile affidavit. That knowledge shapes the gait, the glance, the habit of keeping community near. Religion remains central here too, though the texture differs from place to place. Black churches in the north and in some southern cities serve not only spiritual needs, but political and social ones as well. They host lectures, schools, relief efforts, anti-slavery meetings, and mutual aid. On Sundays you may hear the rustle of good clothes carefully maintained, smell pomade, starch, and polished wood, and feel a warmth that comes from gathering among people who do not require explanation from one another. Sermons may console, challenge, or sharpen resolve. Music lifts the room, prayer steadies the nerves. In an age of denial, worship offers recognition. Free black women often hold communities together through labour that formal histories once treated as background. They organise fairs to raise school funds, visit the sick, collect clothing, teach children, manage homes under intense pressure, and sustain associational life with astonishing discipline. Their names are not always preserved as often as those of famous male speakers, but their work is everywhere once you know how to look. A church supper does not prepare itself. A classroom does not hold together on noble ideals alone. Someone buys candles, someone keeps records, someone notices which child needs shoes. Education carries a special charge. To learn reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, scripture, and history in 1861 as a black child or adult is to participate in a deeply political act, even when the lesson itself feels ordinary. A slate pencil scratching over sums can sound almost defiant. Books may be second-hand, pages loose, desks crude, but the room still hums with ambition. Parents sacrifice for tuition when tuition is needed. Teachers stretch resources. Students memorize carefully because materials are scarce. Many know that white Americans often claim black people are incapable of serious learning. Achievement therefore carries not only personal value, but communal pride. Historians still dispute how much weight to place on class differences within free black communities, because records show real variation in wealth, education, complexion, occupation, and status. In cities such as New Orleans, especially before the war, there are free people of colour with property, businesses, and in some cases substantial cultural capital. In northern cities too, some black families have relative comfort compared with neighbours living close to hunger. But that variation should not hide the larger condition. Even the most established free black household moves within a society ready to remind it that race outranks respectability in white eyes. Political awareness runs high. Free black Americans read newspapers intensely, attend meetings, and follow speeches by figures such as Frederick Douglass and other anti-slavery leaders. They understand that the crisis of secession concerns their future directly, even when white politicians discuss it in terms that pretend otherwise. In parlours, church basements, meeting halls, and boarding houses, people ask pressing questions. Will war destroy slavery or merely rearrange power among white men? Will black men be allowed to fight will the federal government protect freedom or retreat from it? The uncertainty is exhausting, but indifference is impossible. The print culture of free black America is particularly important. Newspapers edited by black writers do more than report events. They create argument, connection, and a record of thought. Articles discuss education, voting rights, colonization schemes, labour discrimination, court cases, church matters, and the national emergency. Reading aloud becomes communal life. One newspaper copy may pass through many hands. In a sitting room lit by evening flame, voices rise and pause over names, dates, outrages, and hopes. News is not passive information. It is fuel. Colonization. The idea that black Americans should leave the United States for Africa, the Caribbean, or Central America remains a live issue in some white political circles in 1861. Many black Americans reject it firmly. They have built lives, families, institutions, and claims in the United States over generations. This is home, however hostile. The suggestion that black people should solve white racism by removing themselves has always possessed a certain shameless convenience. Free black speakers and writers answer it with force. They demand citizenship, not exile decorated as policy. Street life teaches daily lessons about status. A well-dressed black man may still be shoved from a sidewalk. A woman carrying parcels may be insulted by boys who have learned cruelty early. A child may enter a shop and be ignored while white customers are served. Yet street life also reveals confidence. Couples stroll after church. Men debate outside meeting halls. Women exchange news from stoops and market stalls. Children run errands with purposeful speed. Community is visible, audible, embodied. That visibility itself can be reassuring. There are pleasures too, because people cannot live by vigilance alone. Music in a parlour, oyster suppers in port cities, literary societies, courtship walks, holiday gatherings, new dresses sewn from painstaking savings, a birthday cake, modest but real. The smell of coffee in the morning, the shine of lamplight on a polished table, the small pride of a child reading clearly from a page. These moments matter. They are not trivial decorations around struggle. They are evidence of full humanity lived on purpose. At the start of the Civil War, then, what is the fragile world of free black Americans like? It is active, watchful, and densely woven. It's a life built through churches, schools, labour, mutual aid, newspapers, and family discipline. It is freedom defended with papers, memory, neighbours, and nerve. It is a life in which dignity must be asserted repeatedly because the surrounding society refuses to grant it calmly. You move through streets full of noise and promise, carrying both the pleasure of self-possession and the burden of knowing how easily white power can threaten it. Still, you keep walking, You keep working. You keep teaching children their names, their prayers, their letters, and their worth. In a nation uncertain whether it will recognize your humanity, you practice that humanity every day with remarkable steadiness. That steadiness is its own kind of courage, quiet but unmistakable. By 1861, one of the safest places you can sometimes find is not safe in any simple way at all. It might be a church with plain benches and draughty walls. It might be a brush arbour hidden among trees. It might be a room above a shop, a back corner of a meeting hall, or a cabin where voices stay low and the door is watched carefully. Sacred space, for Black Americans at the start of the Civil War, is not merely about doctrine. It is about breath. It is about rest for the mind. It is about hearing yourself called a child of God in a nation that keeps inventing reasons to call you less. You enter such a place slowly. The floorboards may creak underfoot. Pine resin and lamp smoke drift through the air. Wet coats hang by the door if the weather is cold. In warmer months, windows are cracked just enough to admit moving air and the scent of dust. Leaves or rain. A woman smooths her skirt before sitting. A man removes his hat and bows his head. Children are hushed, not always successfully. Someone opens a hymnal if there is one. Someone else has no book at all and knows every line by heart. The room settles into expectancy. Church life varies widely across the United States in 1861 because Black Americans live under different legal and social conditions. In northern cities, independent black churches can be large, stable, and institutionally powerful. In some southern cities, free black congregations exist under careful regulation. On plantations and in rural districts, enslaved people may be required to attend white supervised services, gathering under ministers who emphasize obedience and patience with suspicious enthusiasm. Yet within these constraints, black worship develops its own language, music, rhythms, leadership, and purposes. A sermon may appear quiet on the surface while carrying far deeper meanings beneath. The sound is one of the first things you notice. A hymn arises not like military music, but like a current gathering strength. Voices enter one by one, then together. Some are soft and low, some bright, some weathered by age and hard labour. The singing may sway rather than march. It may bend notes in ways that written music never fully captures. Hands clap in time when the setting allows it. Feet tap against worn boards. A leader calls a line and others answer. The room becomes less a collection of bodies and more a shared pulse. Even sorrow can sound warm when carried together. For enslaved people especially, religion can provide language for feelings that cannot safely be stated in blunt political terms. Biblical stories matter because they feel close to life. Israel in bondage, Daniel in danger, Ezekiel in the valley, Christ suffering under worldly power, Moses standing before Pharaoh with a demand no tyrant ever enjoys hearing. White ministers may stress submission, but black listeners often hear justice, deliverance, endurance, and divine judgment. The text is the same. The listening is not. That difference changes everything. Prayer meetings among enslaved communities can be deeply intimate. A person kneels on packed earth or rough floorboards, hands clasped, shoulders bent, voice rising with a tremor that comes from both faith and fatigue. Names are spoken quietly. The sick, the missing, the sold, the frightened, the children, the old, the ones who have run, the ones thinking of running, the ones who must stay still and wait. The prayer may ask for daily bread, for strength in labour, for mercy at the hand of a cruel owner, for protection over loved ones, or for the Lord to trouble the conscience of the mighty. A sensible request, though perhaps ambitious. In many places, black worship is watched. White authorities fear gatherings they cannot fully control, and for obvious reasons. Any space that allows black people to think collectively, feel collectively, and speak in symbolic language is treated with suspicion. Laws in some southern states restrict unsupervised meetings, especially at night. Patrols may interrupt. Owners may punish attendance at unauthorized gatherings. Ministers can be monitored. Yet meetings continue where possible, because people need more than food and labour to remain fully human. They need meaning. They need hope shaped into words. A curious detail from many recollections shows the ingenuity of these gatherings. In secret meetings held outdoors, enslaved worshippers sometimes dampen sound by praying over overturned pots or kettles, or by placing cloth nearby, hoping to soften the reach of voices into the night. The image is humble and practical, faith-meeting acoustics, heaven assisted by kitchenware. It is also moving, because it shows how carefully people protected the small freedom to speak openly before God when almost no other open speech was allowed. Black churches in northern cities serve purposes that extend well beyond Sunday worship. They are schools, meeting places, lecture halls, relief centres, and civic headquarters. Notices are read from the pulpit. Money is collected for widows, burial costs, scholarships, and fugitives fleeing slavery. Announcements about jobs, housing, illness, and political meetings circulate among the pews. A church basement may hold a literary society one evening and a sewing circle the next. A visiting speaker may discuss the crisis in the Union, anti-slavery strategy, colonization, or the rights of free black citizens. Sacred and practical life are not neatly divided. Women are central to all of this. They organise clothing drives, prepare meals, nurse the sick, arrange charity events, teach children, manage choir rehearsals, and keep congregational life from drifting into chaos. Men often hold formal titles more visibly in the surviving record, but women carry a stunning amount of the actual structure. One can imagine a church as an institution of sermons and doctrine. In practice, it is also candles trimmed, floors swept, children corrected, records kept, shawls folded, dishes washed, and grief answered at the door. The kingdom of God, at least in human form, runs on an impressive amount of unpaid labour. The smell of a church gathering can be its own world. Wool coats drying from rain, leather shoes warmed near a stove, hair oil, pomade, starch, old wood, lamp oil, soap, and perfume used sparingly but with care. In rural prayer meetings there may be damp leaves, smoke from nearby fires, and the earthy scent of the night itself. These details matter because worship is not abstract. It happens in bodies that have worked hard, walked far, endured insults, and still arrive determined to stand straight for an hour or two in one another's company. Music holds special force. Spirituals, hymns, and lined-out songs can carry theological meaning, emotional release, and coded social understanding all at once. A song about crossing Jordan may speak of heaven, but listeners may also hear longing for earthly release. A song about home may mean home beyond death, or home as safety, or home as family held together, or freedom not yet reached. Historians still argue over exactly how often specific songs functioned as deliberate codes for escape or resistance, because evidence is mixed and later memory can add layers. Yet the broader truth is clear. Black sacred music gave people a flexible language for pain, endurance, and possibility. Preaching styles vary, but many black congregations value emotional force, vivid imagery, and close connection between scripture and lived experience. A preacher may begin quietly, reading a passage in steady tones, then build toward urgency as the congregation responds with murmurs, amens, and nods. He may describe Pharaoh's heart, the storm on Galilee, the dry bones rising, the foolishness of worldly pride, the certainty that no earthly throne stands forever. Listeners hear more than theology. They hear moral pattern. They hear that the proud are not permanent. In 1861, that idea can settle into the mind like a spark in dry grass. Church discipline also matters. Congregations often expect members to attend regularly, behave decently, support one another, and protect the reputation of the institution. This is partly moral seriousness and partly strategy. Respectability can serve as defense in a hostile society. Neat dress, orderly conduct, and formal membership carry social weight. At the same time, sacred space allows for emotional freedom that other settings deny. Tears can fall there, voices can rise. Someone exhausted by labour or insult all week can finally let feelings show. The church asks for dignity and offers release. For children, church is one of the first places where collective memory takes shape. They hear elders pray in ways that preserve names, stories, and lessons. They learn hymns before fully grasping all the words. They sit through long sermons, fidgeting and listening in uneven measures, while absorbing the posture of the room. They see adults treated with honour. They learn who is wise, who is kind, who brings food when a family is sick, who knows scripture, who can sing the rafters awake, who always arrives late but somehow gets forgiven. Community becomes legible there. The church is also a place where free black Americans can cultivate leadership. Ministers, teachers, trustees, deacons, class leaders, choir heads, and organisers gain experience managing people, money, events, and arguments. This matters greatly in 1861 when formal political power is so limited for black citizens. If the ballot box is blocked, the pulpit, classroom, and meeting table become even more important. Institutions teach skill. Skill prepares communities for crisis. A well-run church can function almost like a parallel civic world, training people to think collectively and act with purpose. There is comfort here, but not simple comfort. Funerals pass through these walls, news of arrests, sales, beatings, illness, and sudden death enters with the congregation. A prayer meeting may include one family grieving a child, another terrified by debt, another fearing a son has been taken, another wondering whether war will scatter every certainty they have built. Faith does not erase that sorrow. It gives sorrow shape, rhythm, and company. Sometimes that is enough to keep a person from breaking. Sometimes it is the only thing available. In free black churches, political discussion often hums just beneath formal worship and sometimes rises directly into it. The secession crisis is impossible to ignore. Congregants ask what Lincoln will do, whether the Union can hold, whether war will come, and whether black people will be used once again as bargaining pieces in a white conflict. Ministers may preach national repentance. They may warn that slavery has corrupted the whole republic. They may urge patience, vigilance, charity, self-improvement, or active resistance depending on temperament and local danger. The sermon becomes a way to interpret the news morally, not merely report it. A mainstream fact of black history in this period is that the African Methodist Episcopal Church and other black denominations have already created remarkable networks of communication and support by 1861. These are not small, accidental gatherings. They're established institutions with ministers, conferences, publications, and shared identity across regions. That structure matters enormously. Information travels along those lines. Relief travels along those lines. Courage does too. There are also moments of ordinary beauty. Sunlight through plain glass onto a wooden floor, a little girl leaning sleepily against her mother's sleeve, a man's deep voice carrying the final verse of a hymn, the feel of a hand laid gently on a shoulder during prayer, the rustle of pages turning together, a bowl of stew offered afterward to someone who needs it, laughter outside once the service ends and serious faces relax. The church is not only a shelter from oppression, it is a place where joy survives respectably, sometimes even mischievously, and for enslaved worshippers in hidden meetings, There can be a rare sensation almost impossible to find elsewhere. Privacy of the soul, not perfect privacy, never that. Someone still keeps watch. Danger still exists, but for a brief hour words can rise uncensored by the owner, unmeasured by the overseer, unanswered by the auction block. A person can speak to God in the company of others who understand exactly what is at stake. The night air cools the skin. Crickets sound from the grass. A low song circles upward. Fear remains near, but so does strength. What does sacred space offer Black Americans in 1861? It offers comfort without naivety. It offers discipline without deadness. It offers a language in which suffering has meaning and injustice has an ending. Even if that ending cannot yet be seen clearly, it offers news, charity, fellowship, memory, leadership, music, and breath. In churches, brush arbours, meeting rooms, and cabins, people gather not because faith makes history disappear, but because faith helps them endure history without surrendering their inner lives to it. That is no small gift. In a world built to deny so much, even a few hours of shared reverence can feel like a kind of reclaimed ground. By the spring of 1861, white America is talking to itself so loudly that Black Americans can hardly avoid hearing every strained note. Secession speeches thunder in state houses. Newspapers pile up on counters and porches. Militia companies parade through town squares with polished buttons, bright flags, and the grave expressions of men trying very hard to look historic. The country is breaking into rival camps, and if you are black in this moment, you understand with painful clarity that both camps are talking about your future, whether they admit it plainly or not. You stand at the edge of a street as drums begin to roll. The sound reaches you through brick walls, wagon noise, and horse traffic, steady and theatrical. Men march in rough formation, some proud, some nervous, some already enjoying the attention far too much. Their boots strike dust or cobblestone, their belts gleam. Spectators gather in clusters, speaking in urgent half whispers and bold declarations. The smell of gun oil, horse sweat, tobacco smoke, and warm wool drifts through the air. War has not yet shown all its teeth, but it is opening its mouth. For white Southerners committed to secession, the language of honour, property, and local rights fills public life. They speak as if their civilization is under attack. In a sense, it is. But the civilization they mean is built on the ownership of black people, and they know it. Secession commissioners, newspaper editors, and politicians make this plain often enough when they are speaking to one another honestly. The election of Abraham Lincoln in November 1860 has convinced many slaveholders that the federal government may eventually threaten slavery's expansion and long-term security. So they act. South Carolina leaves the Union in December 1860. Other Deep South states follow during the winter. Conventions meet. Ordinances are signed. A new Confederate government begins to form. If you're enslaved in the South, these events are not abstractions. They drift into daily life through sharper moods, altered routines, and the talk of white people who assume your furniture with ears. Owners become more anxious or more boastful, sometimes both in the same afternoon. Young white men drill in open fields. Old political arguments turn hot at the dinner table. Some owners speak of defending their homes, others speak more bluntly of defending slavery, though usually with a polished layer of self-respect spread over the sentence. Enslaved listeners do not need a law degree to understand the core issue. The men preparing to leave the Union are preparing to protect a system that feeds on black labour. Free black Americans, especially in northern cities, watch the sectional crisis with a different but equally intense attention. Newspapers carry the headlines, meeting halls fill with debate. Church leaders discuss the meaning of secession and the dangers of compromise. Black political thinkers understand that the national conflict may reshape the future of slavery, citizenship, military service, and federal authority. But hope does not arrive untroubled. There is also fear that white politicians will once again strike some bargain that preserves the Union at black expense. This country has a talent for asking black people to bear the cost of the white reconciliation. You can feel the uncertainty in the air after Lincoln's election, and before his inauguration on March 4, 1861. President James Buchanan, still in office until March, appears weak and hesitant. Federal authority looks uncertain. Southern arsenals, forts, and custom houses become points of struggle. People ask whether the Union will fight, compromise, or simply unravel. In black communities, both enslaved and free, these questions carry immediate emotional weight. A delay in policy is not just a delay in politics. It is a delay in whether families remain under bondage, whether patrols tighten, whether escape becomes more possible, and whether national chaos will bring danger or opening. The speeches of white leaders can sound very different depending on who is speaking and who is listening. Southern secessionists wrap themselves in the language of liberty while defending slavery. Northern moderates speak of saving the Union while avoiding direct promises to end slavery where it already exists. Abolitionists demand a moral reckoning. Democrats splinter. Republicans try to hold a coalition together. The constitutional vocabulary grows dense. Sovereignty, coercion, compact, property, union, rights. It is an impressive wall of words. Black Americans hear what sits underneath. Who may own whom? Who counts as a citizen? Who decides whether black lives are secure or disposable? In the South, public rituals of secession multiply. Bells ring when ordinances pass, cannons may fire, flags appear on porches and rooftops, crowds cheer speeches in squares, toasts are raised in parlours thick with cigar smoke and self-congratulation. The mood can be triumphant, almost festive, among supporters. For black observers, these celebrations can feel chilling. White joy is not always good news. Sometimes it is the smile of a system congratulating itself for surviving another challenge. The sight of cheering men beneath new banners tells you something plain. They are not celebrating your freedom. There are moments when the contrast becomes almost absurd. A white speaker praises the sacred principle of self-government while attended by enslaved servants who cannot govern even the direction of their own footsteps. A militia captain boasts of resisting tyranny while black teamsters haul supplies under compulsion. A newspaper editor warns of northern aggression while demanding stronger discipline over enslaved workers at home. The contradictions are so large they nearly become comic, though the consequences are never funny. Gentle sarcasm is really the only polite response history leaves available. In northern cities, the pageantry of unionism has its own complications. Crowds cheer the flag, bands play patriotic tunes, men promise to defend the nation. Yet black Americans know the Union being praised has long tolerated slavery, enforced fugitive slave laws, and denied equal rights in much of the free North. Loyalty to the Union is therefore not a simple emotion. Many black Americans hope the crisis will destroy slavery, but they do not confuse the existing Union with justice itself. The flag inspires some. It disappoints others. Often it does both at once. When Lincoln finally takes office in early March, black Americans listen carefully to what he says and what he does not say. His first inaugural address aims above all to prevent further secession and reassure the South that he will not interfere with slavery where it already exists. For enslaved people hoping for immediate deliverance, that is hardly stirring. For free black activists who have pressed for abolition and equality, it confirms that moral clarity still competes with political caution. Lincoln opposes slavery's extension into the territories, and this matters enormously in national politics. But he does not enter office as an immediate emancipator. That fact shapes expectations in black communities from the start. Historians still debate the precise degree to which ordinary enslaved people followed Lincoln's words and early policy positions in real time. Because evidence survives unevenly, and often through white reporting. Yet there is little doubt that his name carried tremendous symbolic weight in many places. Lincoln becomes more than a politician's name. It becomes a rumour, a guess, a possibility, a word spoken with hope or suspicion depending on context. Some imagine he will free the slaves at once. Others doubt any white politician will act so boldly. Most probably hold a mix of hope and caution, which is usually the safest emotional arrangement in a dangerous era. Then comes Fort Sumter. In April 1861, Confederate forces fire on the federal fort in Charleston Harbor. The bombardment is brief but world-changing. When the fort falls and Lincoln calls for troops to suppress the rebellion, the crisis becomes open war. More Upper South states, including Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, move toward the Confederacy after Lincoln's call. The map of conflict widens fast. Black Americans, especially those in border regions and major cities, feel the shift almost immediately. Troop movement increases, public anxiety sharpens, markets react, families argue, newspapers explode with extra editions. The soundscape changes too. More marching, more shouting, more hooves on the road. For enslaved people in Confederate territory, the start of war raises urgent questions. Will masters leave to join the army? Will supervision loosen or harden? Will armies create chances to flee? Will enslaved labour be used even more heavily to support military preparations? The answer, in many places, is yes to the last question. Confederate society depends deeply on enslaved labour to keep agriculture running, transport goods, build defences, cook meals, tend horses, and sustain the home front. White men talk about gallant sacrifice while leaving millions of black people to maintain the world they claim to defend. There is that irony again, trudging along in its work boots, in free black communities of the North. The outbreak of war sparks meetings, speeches, and intense discussion. Many black men are eager to serve the Union cause immediately, both from patriotism and from the belief that military service could strengthen claims to citizenship. Yet in 1861, the federal government is not ready to accept black soldiers into the army. This exclusion stings. Black Americans are asked to care about the nation's fate while being denied a full role in fighting for it. Some continue to press for enlistment. Others focus on relief work, fundraising, abolitionist organising, and watching federal policy with a very sceptical eye. Watching white America divide also means watching white families divide. In border states and mixed communities, loyalties split households, neighbourhoods, churches, and political circles. A black domestic worker may hear one brother praise the Union while another defends secession over supper. A hired-out labourer may overhear arguments in workshops that turn nearly violent. A free black barber may listen as customers discuss troop numbers, tariffs, forts, and state pride, all while pretending the barber is merely an extension of the chair. Black observers develop a remarkable skill for hearing the truth in what white people say when they are speaking to each other rather than to the public. Rumour thrives in this environment. Some say Lincoln has already signed secret orders for emancipation. Some say Southern masters plan to sell huge numbers of enslaved people farther west. Some say Britain will support the Confederacy. Some say the war will be over in weeks. That last one, in particular, ages badly almost at once. Rumour spreads because information is uneven and because people desperately need to imagine the future before it arrives. In black communities, rumour can be both dangerous and sustaining. A false hope can wound. A hopeful whisper can also keep a person going through one more hard day. The emotional experience of this political rupture is complicated. Fear is obvious enough. War means instability, shortages, displacement, and retaliation. But there is also a strange kind of alertness, almost electric, especially among those who have long believed the slave system could not last forever without a reckoning. You begin to sense that the giant structure dominating American life may finally have entered a crisis it cannot easily master. That does not mean safety. It does not mean freedom arrives tomorrow. It means history has started moving faster, and everyone can feel the floorboards tremble. Public spaces become theatres of loyalty. Men wear cockades and badges, flags are displayed, toasts are demanded. In the Confederacy, any sign of a sympathy for the Union can provoke fury. In the North, support for the war often coexists with racism and suspicion toward black people, so even the public enthusiasm surrounding the conflict does not offer simple belonging. A black person may stand among cheering crowds and still feel the edge of exclusion. The nation is in crisis, but the habits of prejudice have no intention of taking leave, and yet black Americans keep watching, listening, measuring. They know that wars are not only fought in speeches or even in battles. They are fought in kitchens, fields, docks, cabins, churches, newspapers, and private conversations where people decide what they believe is now possible. By the end of these opening months of 1861, white America has split into armed camps, each claiming legitimacy. Black Americans are left to interpret what that split might mean for their own lives with limited power but enormous clarity. What does it feel like to witness such a rupture from the margins and the centre at once? It feels like standing in a crowded room where everyone is discussing your fate without looking directly at you. It feels like hearing liberty invoked by men who fear your freedom more than your suffering. It feels like sensing that old certainties are failing. While not yet knowing whether the collapse will crush you or carry you somewhere new, the drums keep rolling, the speeches keep coming, the flags rise and snap in the wind, and beneath all the noise, black Americans continue the quiet, essential work of understanding what many white leaders still refuse to admit plainly. This war is bound up with slavery, and slavery is bound up with everything. News in 1861 rarely arrives neatly. It does not step to the door, clear its throat, and present itself with perfect accuracy. It leaks, rushes, mutters, and changes shoes halfway down the road. For black Americans at the start of the Civil War, information is precious precisely because it is uneven. A word overheard in a kitchen may matter more than a printed column. A whisper at a dock may outrun an official notice. A face returning from town with unusual urgency can say almost as much as a newspaper headline. You learn to read not only words, but motion, silence, and tone. Imagine a street corner in a southern town. Dust hangs lightly in the air. A wagon rattles by with loose boards knocking against one another. Men gather outside a post office, a hotel porch, or a shop with newspapers folded under their arms. Their voices rise and drop in quick bursts. One man gestures toward the telegraph office. Another insists he has the latest account from Charleston, or Richmond, or Washington. A horse snorts beside a hitching rail. Tobacco smoke drifts under the afternoon heat. On the edge of this scene, black workers move through their duties while listening with deliberate care. A driver waits with a cart. A woman carries parcels. A barber stands near his doorway. No one is supposed to be taking it all in. Everyone is taking it all in. For enslaved people, news often travels through indirect channels. In the plantation household, a cook or domestic servant may hear dinner talk between white family members and guests. Names come first: Lincoln, Davis, Beauregard, Sumter, Virginia. Then pieces of meaning attached to them. At a stable, a coachman hears travellers complain of troop movements. In a town workshop, a hired-out artisan catches part of an argument between customers. At a river landing, a boatman hears that another state has left the Union. One sentence becomes three by the time it is repeated at night, but even a half-understood account can carry enormous weight. The telegraph has changed the pace of information by 1861, though access to it is deeply unequal. Black Americans generally do not stand inside telegraph offices reading dispatches for themselves, but they absolutely notice the effects. A messenger arrives in haste. Men run toward town rather than away from it. Church bells ring at an odd hour. An editor posts a bulletin outside his office. The entire atmosphere shifts. A quirky detail remembered in several communities is that people sometimes judge the seriousness of events by the speed and posture of white men moving from the telegraph office. A walking pace suggested routine, a near run suggested trouble. History can be interpreted by headline, yes, but also by how fast someone forgets to hold his hat. In free black communities, especially in northern cities, newspapers play a much larger direct role. Papers lie folded on counters in barbershops, church offices, meeting halls, and private homes. Not everyone can afford a subscription, but one copy may be read by many people. Some are mainstream dailies, some are anti-slavery papers, some are black-edited newspapers that speak more clearly to black concerns than most white publications ever manage. The paper crackles in the hand. Ink smudges a finger. A paragraph is read aloud, then reread with sharper emphasis. The room fills with reaction, a sigh, a laugh without much humour, a prayerful silence. Information becomes collective almost immediately. Barbershops are especially lively places for news. A chair turns, a razor glides carefully along a cheek. The smell of soap, warm towels, bay rum, and hair oil sits in the room. Customers talk more freely than they should, assuming the barber is present but somehow not fully politically alive. An old mistake. Barbers hear party loyalties, troop rumours, election gossip, private fears, and public boasting. In northern cities, black barbers often serve white customers and therefore occupy a strange position. They are expected to be attentive without appearing opinionated, yet their shops can become informal intelligence centres. News passes from customer to barber, from barber to community, from community to meeting hall. On the docks, information travels by vessel and by mouth. Sailors bring stories before papers print them. Free black seamen and dock workers occupy a valuable place in this world of movement. They know routes, schedules, delays, cargoes, and port moods. They hear accents from distant places. They know which captain drinks too much and which mate exaggerates everything. A ship arriving late can mean weather, inspection, or something larger. A ship arriving full of tense conversation and unusual paperwork means the world has shifted again. The smell here is strong and unmistakable. Salt water, tar, fish, rope, wet wood, sweat, and coal smoke. News enters with all of it. Churches also function as communication networks. A minister travelling between towns brings reports. A congregation hears an update from the pulpit or after service. Letters are carried. Visiting relatives share what they have seen. Prayer requests themselves can become a form of information. Pray for the family in that county. Pray for the men arrested there. Pray for the woman whose husband was sent away with troops. The language of concern often carries the shape of local events. In communities where open political discussion is dangerous, sacred language can hold public meaning with a little more safety. For enslaved people, nighttime remains one of the key hours for exchanging information. After labour ends and darkness settles, conversation can finally begin, though never without caution. A cabin door closes, firelight trembles on the wall. Someone eats late from a tin plate. Someone else lowers their voice and repeats what was heard at the big house, or on the road, or from a man hired into town. The children are told to hush, the adults lean in. News travels in pieces, and pieces must be assembled. Did another state join the Confederacy? Did Lincoln call for more troops? Did a nearby owner leave for the army? Did anyone escape toward federal lines? Each answer matters because each one changes what might be possible. Accuracy is a problem, of course. Rumour can expand like dough near a fire. A small event becomes large. A delayed order becomes emancipation by supper time. A troop movement becomes an invasion. A single successful escape becomes a sign that every road is suddenly open. Historians still argue over how quickly and how accurately specific developments reached enslaved communities, because surviving evidence is scattered and often filtered through hostile observers. But uncertainty itself is part of the story. People in danger cannot wait for perfectly sourced analysis. They make choices from fragments. That does not mean they are naive. Quite the opposite. Black Americans in 1861 often show remarkable skill at sorting likely truth from theatrical nonsense. They compare reports. They notice who exaggerates. They observe outcomes. If a master begins locking things earlier, something has changed. If patrols become more active, authorities are nervous. If white men who once argued politics casually now speak in tense whispers, the matter is serious. This is practical reasoning under pressure, and it deserves respect. In free black northern households, evenings can become miniature newsrooms. A lamp glows on the table. Needles move through cloth while someone reads aloud from a paper. Children listen while pretending not to. A father stops the reading to explain a political phrase. A mother asks who wrote the article and whether he can be trusted. A boarder at the back of the room adds what he heard at the docks. The smell of stew lingers from supper. Teacups cool outside. Carriage wheels pass over stone. Inside, the family pieces together the nation. This is not merely consuming news. It is interpreting power. Women play a crucial role in these informal information systems. Domestic workers hear things employers do not mean to share. Market women gather reports from customers, teamsters, and neighbouring stalls. Washerwomen move between households and carry more than laundry in memory. Women at church, at pump, at doorstep, and at sewing circle exchange names, warnings, and local developments with precision. Official histories too often chase grand speeches by famous men while missing the subtler networks that actually kept communities informed. The Republic may imagine itself built on telegraphs and legislatures. Much of its real circulation runs on conversation between women who know exactly what matters. One mainstream fact of the Civil War era is that literacy among Black Americans varies greatly because slavery and discrimination have deliberately restricted access to education. Yet even where reading is limited, news does not stop. Oral culture is powerful. A person who cannot read a printed column can still remember names, dates, place names, troop numbers, and political outcomes with startling accuracy once heard aloud. Songs can carry meaning. Jokes can carry warning. Proverbs can preserve strategy. Information adapts to the channels available. There is danger in knowing too much and danger in knowing too little. An enslaved person who shows too much awareness of national politics may attract suspicion. A free black activist who speaks too openly may be targeted by hostile officials or mobs. A person carrying papers or letters may be searched. A conversation held in the wrong place may bring punishment. So information must be handled carefully. Names may be omitted, messages may be coded, routes may change. Trust becomes everything. Who told you? Who heard it first? Who was in the room? Was he drinking? Did she hear it herself? These are serious questions, not gossip for entertainment. Children pick up bits of the news world too. They hear adults stop talking when they enter. They catch repeated names. They notice when church meetings run long, or when fathers come home later than usual. Some older children are sent on errands that place them near bulletin boards, depots, or shop counters. A boy may return saying that men were crowding around a poster. A girl may report that her employer's household was in tears or fury. Children are not outside history. They are inside it with less explanation. In Confederate territory, the official flow of news often aims to strengthen white morale and discipline. Newspapers trumpet victories, minimize setbacks, and frame the war in terms favorable to secession. Yet cracks appear quickly, casualty lists lengthen, supply worries grow, contradictions multiply. Enslaved and free, black observers listen not only to what is announced, but to what is avoided. When no one mentions a battle directly, perhaps it went badly. When a white family suddenly lowers expenses, perhaps money has become tight. Silence can report almost as much as speech. In the North, black readers confront another problem. Even papers that oppose secession may still speak with stunning condescension about black people. An article may call slavery evil and still question black citizenship in the next breath. So reading the news requires emotional stamina. You are informed and insulted at once. Black newspapers and speakers push back against this relentlessly, insisting that the war must not be fought only for reunion, but for justice. Otherwise, what is the nation saving exactly? Its map, its habits, its favourite hypocrisies. At times, news arrives embodied in actual movement. Soldiers on the road, refugees, men returning wounded, families packing, a federal officer posted where none stood before, a plantation owner gone for days. These developments do not need explanation to be understood. The world itself has begun to carry headlines in its posture. You see them in the lines at a store, in the emptiness of a stable, in the tension of a checkpoint, in the way people ask for flour with too much urgency. The emotional atmosphere around news is rarely calm. Hope rises fast and falls hard. Fear settles in the stomach. Anger sharpens the voice. Sometimes people laugh at absurd claims because laughter is easier than trembling. Sometimes they pray before discussing the latest report. Sometimes they refuse to believe good news because disappointment has trained them well. That caution is not coldness. It is self-protection. A people long denied reliable justice do not surrender easily to easy optimism. Still, the steady exchange of information does something important. It creates connection. It reminds isolated people that they are not entirely alone inside their uncertainty. A farm labourer hearing of events in Richmond, a washerwoman learning of a debate in Washington, a dock worker reporting a ship's account from another port, a child listening at the table while elders discuss the latest paper. All are participating in a shared act of interpretation. They are making sense of a nation in upheaval from positions the nation rarely respects. So what does news feel like for black Americans in 1861? It feels warm from another person's hand as a newspaper passes across a table. It feels dangerous in the mouth when spoken to clearly. It feels electric when a rumour suggests change. It feels heavy when reports confirm more violence and delay. It smells of ink, tar, lamp oil, sweat, wet wool, and kitchen steam. It sounds like pages turning, voices dropping, horses arriving late, and someone at last saying, "Here is what I heard." In a year when the country is being rewritten, the flow of news becomes more than information. It becomes a survival skill, a form of collective intelligence, and sometimes the only light available before the next uncertain dawn. Separation is one of the deepest wounds in black life in 1861, and it does not always arrive with a dramatic scene. Sometimes it comes with hoofbeats in the yard before breakfast, sometimes with a letter read aloud in a calm voice, sometimes with a man in a good coat looking over a child the way he might inspect a mule, which is enough to make the air in the room feel wrong. Families can be built with devotion, patience, and years of effort, then broken in an afternoon by debt, inheritance, punishment, speculation, or a master's sudden decision. Love is constant. Security is not. You begin in a cabin where morning has not fully opened yet. The fire is weak and red in the hearth. A mother is already awake, smoothing a child's blanket with tired fingers. The smell of smoke, cornmeal, and damp wool hangs close to the ceiling. Someone outside coughs in the cold. A mule shifts in its stall. Inside, there is that fragile feeling some homes carry just before a hard truth enters. No one says it yet, but everyone has been listening for it. For enslaved families, marriage exists strongly in custom and feeling, but weakly in law. A husband and wife may choose each other, honour each other, share a bed when allowed, raise children, and build a true household in every human sense. Yet the law does not reliably protect that bond, An owner can sell one spouse away. Different owners may control husband and wife from the beginning. Permission is often required for visits, and those visits can be limited by distance, weather, labour demands, and the moods of white people who treat love as an inconvenience. You may walk miles after dark to see your wife for a few hours, then walk back before dawn to avoid punishment. That journey becomes part of married life. The phrase, abroad marriage, is often used for unions between enslaved people living on different plantations. Such marriages are common in many places, especially where ownership patterns and labour need scatter people across neighbouring farms and estates. They require planning, stamina, and hope. A man finishes his day's work, waits for dusk, secures a pass if he can, or slips away without one if he must, then walks through mud, woods, and darkness to reach his wife. The road is quiet except for insects, dogs, and the distant creak of wagons. The night air is cool on his face. He reaches the cabin, knocks softly, and for a few hours the world narrows to family. Then the road calls him back again. Romance, in these conditions, has very sturdy boots. Children grow up inside this uncertainty. They know who their parents are. They know who tucks them in, who scolds them, who laughs at their jokes, who braids their hair, who carries them when they are ill. But they also know that adults disappear. A father may be hired out farther away. A mother may be sent to another household. A sibling may be sold after being valued in a way no child should ever witness. Black children in slavery learn very early that attachment and danger walk together. It gives family life an intensity that is tender and painful at once. The domestic slave trade remains one of the central engines of this suffering in 1861. For decades, traders have moved enslaved people from the Upper South to the expanding plantation regions of the Deep South, especially as cotton and sugar production grow. Virginia, Maryland, and Kentucky send people southward. Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Arkansas, and Texas receive them. This trade does not end because the nation is entering civil war. Families can still be split by sale, by estate settlement, by creditors, or by owners trying to manage risk in uncertain times. Human beings are turned into liquid assets with chilling efficiency. The auction itself is remembered in countless ways, and none of them kindly. The setting may be a courthouse yard, a trader's pen, a city market, or the porch of an estate house. The day may be hot, with flies settling on everything, or cold enough to sting the skin. Buyers stand with hands in pockets, inspecting teeth, muscles, posture, age, and temperament. Mothers try to keep children close. Older people know too much. Younger people suddenly understand more than anyone wants them to. The smell of dust, sweat, leather, and horse manure mixes with fear so palpable it almost changes the air. A human voice calls prices. It is one of the ugliest sounds in American history. Not every separation comes through auction. Some come through hiring out. A teenager may be sent to town for a year. A skilled man may be hired to a workshop. A woman may be placed in another household as a domestic worker or nurse. Sometimes these arrangements allow more contact with a wider world. Sometimes they cut a person off from family almost as sharply as sale. A child used to sleeping beside siblings may suddenly find herself in a strange room, under strange rules, with the smell of unfamiliar soap and food and floorboards. Loneliness has textures. It feels like the wrong pillow. It sounds like strangers moving in the dark, or in 1861 adds new pressures to already fragile family life. White men leave home to join Confederate units or, in the North, Union regiments. Their departures rearrange labour, authority, and anxiety. In slaveholding regions, some owners fear unrest and consider moving enslaved people, tightening control, or breaking up households preemptively. Others rely even more heavily on enslaved labour to keep farms and plantations running in their absence. For the enslaved, the war does not magically pause family loss. In some places it intensifies it. A master in debt, worried about uncertainty, may sell people. A family can be broken not only by long-standing custom, but by wartime panic. Free black families also live with the threat of separation, though in different forms. Poverty can force parents and children into scattered work arrangements. Women may labour in one household while children stay with relatives. Sailors and dock workers vanish for long periods with their employment. In border regions and slave states, kidnapping remains a terrifying possibility. A free black child sent on an errand may not return. A man travelling for work may be seized and claimed as a fugitive. Legal freedom helps, but it does not remove fear from the doorway, and yet family bonds are cultivated with astonishing care. Parents teach children names, kinship lines, church ties, and the places where relatives live. Grandmothers preserve stories in exact detail. Who married whom? Who was sold from which county? Which aunt lives near the river? Which cousin has the scar on his wrist? Memory becomes a family archive when paper records are denied, destroyed, or dangerous to keep. To remember is to resist disappearance. A child repeating the names of brothers and sisters is doing more than learning family history. The child is helping hold the family together across force. Objects take on special importance in such conditions. A ribbon from a mother, a small knife from a father, a carved toy, a patchwork quilt, a Bible page, a button, a kerchief that still carries faint scent if you press it close enough and believe hard enough. These things are not trivial. They anchor people to one another when law and distance work to unmake connection. A quirky detail found in some recollections is that children were sometimes taught to memorize not only relatives' names, but distinguishing marks, phrases, or songs associated with family, as if identity itself had to be stitched into the mind against the market's attempt to erase it. Daily affection survives despite everything. A mother oils her daughter's scalp and parts her hair with careful hands. A father lifts a sleepy child onto his shoulder at the end of the day. An aunt saves a better piece of food for a nephew. A grandmother hums while rocking an infant near the fire. The sounds are ordinary. Soft laughter, wooden spoon against pot, footsteps at the threshold. These moments matter more, not less, because they are vulnerable. Slavery cannot understand love except as inconvenience or leverage. The people living under it understand it as necessity. Historians still debate the exact proportion of enslaved marriages and household forms across different regions, because records are incomplete and often shaped by white assumptions. Plantation journals may ignore relationships that matter deeply. Census materials do not tell the emotional truth of a cabin at night. But across the evidence, one thing is unmistakable. Enslaved people invested tremendous effort in forming and maintaining family under conditions designed to frustrate it. They married when they could. They parented fiercely. They mourned intensely. They searched for missing kin over years and sometimes decades. Family was not a side note to survival. It was survival. The emotional atmosphere around sale and separation is difficult to overstate. Fear can become anticipatory, always listening for the next sign, a cart arriving unexpectedly, a master in conversation with a stranger, a bookkeeper checking names, an owner unusually pleasant, which may be worse than anger because it means calculation is underway. Some people try not to hope too much because hope makes the cut deeper. Others cling to promises made by owners, though such promises are notoriously fragile. You won't be sold has ended many badly. Mothers, especially, carry impossible burdens. They must soothe children they cannot guarantee to protect. They must pack mental bags for futures they pray will not arrive. They must continue cooking, washing, working, and appearing composed under the weight of dread. The touch of a child's hand on the sleeve can bring both joy and panic. Joy because the child is here. Panic because here may not last. This is a cruel way to force anyone to love. By making every ordinary day feel borrowed, fathers face their own bitter limits. Many are expected to provide guidance, discipline, and protection, while knowing legal power belongs entirely to someone else. A father may teach his son how to chop wood, mend a harness, stand straight, speak carefully, and recognize danger in white faces. He may also know he cannot stop a sale, a whipping, or a forced removal. That helplessness can settle into a man's body like lead. Yet many continue to father with dignity, humour, and patience anyway. One of slavery's persistent failures is that it never fully grasps the moral strength of those it tries to reduce. When family members are separated, information becomes lifeblood. People ask travellers for names and destinations. Letters are attempted where literacy and opportunity allow. Messages are passed through preachers, teamsters, boatmen, traders' slaves, and anyone moving between counties or states. A person sold south may live for years in the minds of relatives through scraps of rumour. He was seen near Vicksburg. She is with a family outside Natchez. The children are in Tennessee now. These fragments can sustain a search or torment it. Not knowing is its own wound. The Civil War's opening months also create a strange new possibility in some minds. If the country is being torn apart, perhaps some families may eventually be reunited through disruption, escape, or federal intervention. This hope is not yet firm or official in 1861. It flickers. Still, flickers matter in dark rooms. A woman whose husband was sold years earlier may suddenly listen differently when war is mentioned. A man hired near a rail line may begin measuring routes in his head. A child hears adults speak a little more softly and intently after the evening meal. Something unnamed begins to stir beside grief. Free black families in the North have their own forms of resilience. They build kin not only by blood but by church membership, boarding relationships, godparent ties, and mutual aid. When poverty or danger strikes, households stretch. A cousin takes in a child. A widow rents a room. A church organises support for a family in distress. These networks matter because legal freedom in a racist society still leaves many people close to the edge. Family becomes larger than the narrow nuclear ideal. It becomes practical love arranged for survival. Even amid sorrow, there are rituals that hold people steady. Naming ceremonies, weddings, formal or informal, Sunday meals when possible, bedtime prayers, stories told by elders while children lean against knees, songs sung low in the dark, a boy learning to call older women auntie from respect, not biology, a girl learning recipes by touch and smell rather than measurement. Such rituals create continuity. They tell people that life has shape beyond the market and the master. What was it like, then, for black Americans to love family in 1861? It was to love with urgency. It was to memorize faces, voices, and names because paper might fail. It was to walk long roads for a few hours together. It was to brace at every knock and still set food on the table. It was to cradle babies under a sky that offered no legal promise they would remain in your arms. It was to hold kinship as sacred while living under systems that priced it. Yet across cabins, city rooms, church steps, and crowded yards, black families kept choosing one another again and again. In that choice lived grief, fear, devotion, and a stubborn refusal to let the world decide that love could be bought, divided, or erased. Resistance in 1861 does not always look like a dramatic sprint through moonlit woods, though sometimes it is exactly that. More often it is smaller, quieter, and woven into the grain of ordinary life. It is the kind of action that can fit inside a glance, a pause, a lie told at the right moment, a tool misplaced with suspicious convenience, a lesson whispered to a child, or a prayer that doubles as a plan. For black Americans at the start of the Civil War, resistance is rarely separate from survival. It grows from the same root. You start in the field, where resistance may appear so slight that an impatient observer would miss it completely. A hoe rises and falls with measured regularity. The line moves forward. Heat presses down across shoulders. Insects hum through tall growth. Dust sticks to sweat at the temples. From a distance, everything looks orderly. Up close, the pace is being negotiated every minute. Someone slows by a fraction to save strength. Someone pretends not to hear the first call. Someone lets a tool dull faster than it should. Someone shields an older worker by taking a wider row. These are not accidents of laziness. They are calculations inside coercion. Slaveholders like to imagine themselves masters of every hour. But labour under force is never as controllable as they pretend. The human body has ways of withholding. A person can work, yet not yield the full measure expected. A person can obey outwardly while choosing inwardly where energy will and will not go. That may sound small. In a regime built on extracting every possible ounce, small choices matter. Resistance often begins as a defense of the self against becoming nothing but an instrument in another person's ledger. Domestic spaces provide their own opportunities. In kitchens, laundries, nurseries, and dining rooms. Enslaved women especially may know far more than the white household suspects. They hear plans, arguments, debts, fears, and schedules. They know which guest talks too much, which master drinks enough to grow careless, which drawer holds important papers, which road the sons are taking, which horse is best for speed, which pantry can spare extra food. Knowledge itself can be a resource. A warning delivered discreetly to another enslaved person may prevent a beating, delay a sale, or support an escape. A bit of food saved from the kitchen can sustain someone through a risky night. Practical mercy becomes a form of rebellion. Men in skilled trades can resist through workmanship, timing, and access. A blacksmith can delay a repair. A carpenter can mismeasure just enough to cause inconvenience. A driver can choose the slower road when it helps another person. A boatman can carry information as easily as cargo. A stable hand knows which horse is restless, which saddle strap is weak, which route is least watched. Skill creates openings, and openings invite imagination. It would be wrong to romanticize this. The danger is real. Discovery can bring severe punishment. Still, the enslaved are not passive cogs. They think, adapt, and exploit every sliver of room the system fails to seal. One mainstream fact about slavery is that resistance took many forms, from daily acts of defiance to open revolt, and historians have spent generations widening the definition beyond spectacular violence. That broader view is essential in 1861. Most people under slavery cannot simply rise up with dramatic success. Patrols, weapons, law, distance, and terror make that unimaginably risky. But they can negotiate work, preserve knowledge, protect one another, damage property, avoid reproduction when possible, feign illness, hide tools, steal food, learn to read in secret, and maintain private loyalties stronger than ownership claims. These acts are not trivial. They are the politics of the constrained. Feigning illness is one of the oldest forms of resistance and one of the hardest to prove. A woman moving slowly at dawn may truly be exhausted, ill, pregnant, injured, or all at once. She may also know that her body is her only negotiable territory and use that fact carefully. A man with a limp may exaggerate it today because he cannot survive another day at full pace. A child may suddenly seem less useful when a sale is being discussed. Enslavers often complain bitterly about deception, as if coercion has somehow earned a transparent cooperation. Strange logic. That. Night offers other possibilities. Once labour ends and darkness settles, the world becomes more flexible. Not safe. Never fully safe, but less visible. A person may slip to a neighbouring plantation to see a spouse, which is an act of family devotion and disobedience at the same time. Another may attend a secret prayer meeting. Another may carry word of an owner's plans. Another may scout a road or test which dogs are tied and which are loose. The sounds of night sharpen everything. Crickets pulse, leaves shift, a branch snaps too loudly. Breath seems enormous. Resistance often moves in such soundscapes, half hidden and entirely serious. A curious tidbit from the era appears in scattered recollections and local lore. Some enslaved people judge the seriousness of an escape plan by the behaviour of dogs in a neighbourhood, not only their presence. Which dogs barked at strangers, which ones quieted after being fed scraps for weeks, which owners trusted scent hounds, and which merely boasted about them. Such knowledge sounds humble, but escape often depends less on heroic speeches than on the practical study of fences, mud, barking, and timing. Resistance also lives in literacy. To learn letters in a society that often forbids black education is to challenge the structure that depends on your enforced ignorance. A child tracing shapes in ash, a woman sounding out words from a Bible page, a man memorizing names from a newspaper read aloud, all are participating in something powerful. Reading opens law, scripture, geography, political argument, and private communication. It allows a person to understand passes, forged papers, sale notices, and military reports. White Southerners fear black literacy for good reason. Knowledge moves, knowledge compares, knowledge refuses. Teaching is therefore a resistant act. An older sibling coaches a younger one after dark. A free black teacher in the North trains students with quiet intensity. Knowing education is both uplift and defense. A preacher introduces biblical phrasing that strengthens memory and vocabulary. A literate worker reads a notice aloud to others who cannot read it themselves. In these moments, learning becomes communal property rather than private accomplishment. It builds resilience one mind at a time. Humour belongs here too. That may seem surprising, but humour can puncture domination in ways hard to measure. Enslaved people joke about owners, mimic their vanity, mock their fears, and share stories in which the powerful appear foolish. Such laughter is rarely safe in front of white people, but in trusted company it matters. It reminds listeners that authority is not sacred. A pompous master becomes a comic figure with too much perfume and not enough sense. An overseer becomes a man outsmarted by a mule or undone by his own temper. Gentle sarcasm survives because absurdity is everywhere. When a man claims ownership over your body while failing to saddle his own horse correctly, the universe is practically asking for commentary. Free black Americans resist in different but connected ways. They organize meetings, publish newspapers, raise money for schools, challenge discriminatory laws, hide fugitives, and insist publicly on citizenship. In 1861, black activists are pressing the nation to understand the war as inseparable from slavery. They write editorials, deliver speeches, form committees, support aid networks, and try to shape public opinion in cities where racism is hardly shy about showing itself. Their resistance is civic, intellectual, and moral. It is also exhausting. To argue for your own humanity day after day requires either saintly patience or an excellent ability to outlast fools, often both. Women in free black communities carry a huge share of this labour. They organise fairs, sew clothing for those in need, shelter travellers, educate children, maintain church networks, and circulate information with remarkable steadiness. Their activism does not always make the loudest newspaper headline, but it keeps communities functioning. A widow taking in a boarder, a teacher extending lessons by candlelight, a churchwoman collecting coins for a family in distress. All are practicing resistance through institution building. Freedom requires maintenance, especially when hostile law and custom are always trying to wear it down. Some forms of resistance are fiercely inward, preserving a name, refusing an owner's preferred lie about your character, holding on to memory when the system demands amnesia, telling children who they are, choosing a spouse by love rather than convenience when choice exists, mourning openly for the sold, keeping faith when faith would be easier to abandon, These things are harder to dramatize than flight or sabotage, but they matter deeply. Slavery seeks not only labour, but definition. It wants to define black people as naturally subordinate, childlike, or broken. Every act of self-knowledge pushes back. Historians still argue over how best to measure the effectiveness of everyday resistance, because the archive is fragmentary and outcomes are often invisible. Did slowing the pace materially change plantation profits? Did feigned illness preserve life or merely shift suffering? Did humour sustain morale in lasting ways? These are fair questions, but the demand to measure everything by immediate external outcome can miss the point. Not every act of resistance topples a regime. Some acts keep a person human inside it for one more day. That too is consequence. In 1861, the opening of war adds urgency to resistant thinking. Some enslaved people test how absent their owners may become. Some note which roads are busier with troops and which are less watched. Some observe whether local whites are too distracted by politics to maintain their old patterns of control. Confederate enthusiasm, for all its noise, creates new vulnerabilities. Men who march off to defend slavery leave gaps behind them. Their system still stands, but it no longer stands quite as calmly. Black people notice. Resistance can also be collective without becoming full rebellion. A work gang may quietly agree on a slower pace. A community may shield the whereabouts of a runaway. A group may gather food for someone hiding nearby. Worshippers may pass information under the cover of prayer meetings. Free black neighbours may pool money to defend one another from legal threats or kidnapping. These acts depend on trust, and trust is one of the great treasures of oppressed communities. It is earned, tested, and guarded carefully. The sensory life of resistance is intimate. The scrape of a hidden pencil on scrap paper, the warm crust of bread tucked into a cloth for someone leaving at dusk, the sting of soap on hands that have quietly washed blood or mud from another person's clothes, the smell of pine woods where a meeting is held off the road, the feel of a forged pass folded tight against the skin, the hush before a whispered plan, the relief when a watcher signals that the path is clear. Great historical shifts are built from such moments, though textbooks do not always know what to do with them. What does resistance look like, then, for black Americans in 1861? It looks like intelligence under pressure. It looks like care turned strategic. It looks like 1,000 decisions made by people who understand that open defiance may be crushed. Yet submission of the spirit is not required. It lives in kitchens, cabins, churches, fields, schools, docks, and city rooms. It may speak loudly, but more often it murmurs. It may run. It may wait. It may laugh at the powerful behind their backs and then outwit them by supper. In a world organized to extract obedience, even the smallest deliberate refusal can glow with meaning. And in that glow, however faint it seems to outsiders, you can already sense the shape of larger change beginning to gather. In the north, freedom can look impressive from a distance. There are no auction blocks in the public square. No overseer rides behind you in the field. No law says you are another person's property. Those facts matter profoundly. Yet when you step into northern city life in 1861 as a black American, you quickly discover that liberty here is often narrow, conditional, and lined with insult. The streets are busy, the wages are real, the communities are vibrant, and the limits are everywhere. You begin on a morning sidewalk in Philadelphia or New York, perhaps Boston, perhaps Cincinnati. The air carries cold smoke, bakery steam, horse sweat, river damp, and the sharp smell of iron from a nearby workshop. Wheels crack over stone, men call out from market stalls, a bell rings from a church tower, then another answers farther off. The city feels alive with motion, and in some ways that motion belongs to you. You can walk where work takes you. You can rent a room if you can afford it. You can attend your church, visit your family, read your newspaper, and speak your name without asking a master's permission. That is no small thing. But freedom in the North is not a welcome mat. It is a contested space. Work is one of the first places you feel this clearly. If you are a black man, you may find employment as a porter, drayman, barber, labourer, waiter, sailor, cook, coachman, or craftsman if someone is willing to hire you. If you are a black woman, you may work as a washerwoman, domestic servant, seamstress, teacher, nurse, vendor, or cook. These jobs are essential. They keep the city running. They also tend to be underpaid, physically demanding, and vulnerable to sudden dismissal. White employers often reserve the most secure and prestigious positions for white workers. Even when black workers are equally skilled or more reliable, merit, as Northern society defines it, has a remarkable habit of changing colour at the hiring desk. Dock work can be especially hard. Barrels scrape over planks, rope burns the palms, crates slam into place with heavy finality, water smells of salt, rot, fish, tar, and smoke from steam vessels. A man's shoulders ache by noon, and his boots remain damp half the day. Yet the docks also offer contact with sailors, merchants, and the latest reports from other cities and ports. Work there can mean information, community, and a little independence. Even when the labour grinds the body down, a man may come home exhausted but better informed than half the politicians shouting in newspaper columns. Domestic service in northern homes carries different burdens. A free black woman may rise early, light fires, scrub floors, boil wash, mend clothes, tend children, and prepare meals in households that depend on her skill while denying her social respect. She may be addressed carelessly, watched too closely, paid too little, and expected to remain politely invisible. The house smells of soap, starch, coffee, roasting meat, lamp oil, and damp wool drying near a kitchen range. Her hands chap in winter. Her back burns in summer. Still, the wages she earns may keep a family housed, clothed, and in school. Economic survival often rests on labour that white society pretends not to notice. Black barbers occupy a particularly interesting position in many northern cities. A barber's shop is part workplace, part listening post, part theatre of masculinity and gossip. Razors flash, towels steam, chairs swivel. Men discuss secession, troop calls, trade, party politics, and city scandals with the confidence of people who assume the barber is only half listening. The barber is fully listening. He must be. His livelihood depends on reading tone as carefully as whiskers. Barbershops become places where black workers gather information, judge public mood, and sometimes quietly shape it. There is a certain elegance in making a living while hearing the republic embarrass itself in your chair. Housing can be difficult and expensive. Black neighbourhoods form partly from choice and solidarity, partly from exclusion. Some streets become centres of community life, with churches, schools, boarding houses, mutual aid societies, shops, and familiar faces near at hand. This closeness can be comforting. Children know which doors are safe. Elders are recognised. News travels quickly. But overcrowding and poverty can weigh heavily. Rent consumes wages. Rooms are shared. Privacy is limited. A boarding house may hold clerks, labourers, widows, children, and one ambitious young teacher all under a single roof, each with different routines and worries. The walls are thin. The soup is stretched. The company is often excellent. For black families, the North offers opportunities that slavery never could, yet those opportunities must be defended constantly. Parents can legally keep their children, marry with recognition, and pursue schooling. That alone transforms household life. A table with schoolbooks on it means something extraordinary in 1861. A child sounding out words by lamplight means even more. Education is prized because everyone understands what it can open and what white prejudice still tries to close. Teachers work with seriousness and devotion, often for little pay and less public gratitude. The classroom smells of chalk, damp coats, slate dust, and ink. It sounds of recitation, correction, pages turning, and the occasional restlessness of children being asked to sit still when the window looks far more interesting. Schools themselves are often segregated or unequal. In some places, black children are excluded from white schools entirely. In others, they are assigned to separate institutions with fewer resources. Northern states vary in policy and practice, but discrimination is common enough to shape daily expectation. Parents therefore organise, petition, fundraise, and argue. They want books, teachers, desks, fuel, and fairness. That they must struggle for such basic things in a supposedly free society tells you a good deal about Northern conscience. Churches remain central in urban Northern life. On Sunday morning, the best clothes come out, brushed and mended with care. Shoes are polished as far as polish will take them. Hats are adjusted. Children are lined up and sent ahead with instructions not to scuff anything. Inside the church, wood polish, perfume, hair oil, starched collars, and warm bodies create a dense familiar atmosphere. Services bring worship, yes, but also announcements, relief efforts, political meetings, courting glances, family introductions, and the subtle comfort of being among people who do not need to explain the world from the beginning. In a society that offers constant slights, that comfort is no luxury. Mutual aid societies do vital work. Illness, unemployment, widowhood, fire, and sudden need can push a family to the edge quickly. Black benevolent associations collect dues, organise funerals, support widows, help pay rent, and provide a measure of insurance before modern systems exist. The practical genius of these institutions should never be underestimated. They are built from discipline, trust, and modest contributions made by people who do not have spare money floating around for amusement. A few coins a month, multiplied by commitment, can keep a child fed or a burial dignified. Political life in the North is both energizing and frustrating. Black Americans attend lectures, publish newspapers, form committees, and follow national developments with intense attention. They know that the war now unfolding may change the future of slavery and citizenship. Many want the Union cause to become an emancipation cause. Many also want immediate permission for black men to serve in the military. In 1861, that permission is largely denied. The federal government hesitates. White officials worry about public opinion, military policy, and racial assumptions that deserve much less courtesy than they receive. So black men eager to fight for a country that has never fully protected them are told, in effect, "Thank you for the enthusiasm. Now please stand aside. It is hard not to admire the efficiency of the insult." Northern racism is not confined to policy. It lives in daily encounters. A black man may be refused service at a restaurant. A woman may be treated rudely in a shop. A family may be mocked while taking a walk. Streetcar segregation or exclusion appears in many places. Even anti-slavery white people can reveal stunning prejudice the moment the conversation shifts from ending slavery to accepting black neighbours as equals. They may praise freedom in the abstract and panic at integration in the concrete. Principle, once again, turns out to have a very selective backbone. Violence is also a real threat. Black neighbourhoods can be targeted by mobs, especially in times of political tension, labour competition, or racial panic. Abolitionist meetings may be disrupted, speakers may be threatened. A black person walking in the wrong place at the wrong hour may find that legal freedom offers protection against a gang with bricks and enthusiasm. This danger is not constant everywhere, but it is near enough to shape behaviour. You learn which routes are safer after dark. You know which corners to avoid when tempers are up. You judge crowds carefully. Historians still argue over how much to emphasise progress versus exclusion in Northern black life before and during the Civil War, because both are undeniably present. There is institution building, literacy, property ownership, activism, and family stability. There is also disenfranchisement, segregation, labour discrimination, and routine humiliation. The truth is not one or the other. It is both at once. Northern freedom is real and incomplete. It offers room to breathe, but not room to forget where you stand in the racial order. A curious detail from the era appears in accounts of city life. In some neighbourhoods, children became excellent readers of social weather long before adulthood. They knew which shopkeepers were decent, which drivers would stop for them, which policemen were trouble, which church ladies always carried sweets, and which public notices mattered enough to run home and report at once. This little urban wisdom, passed among children as naturally as games and rhymes, formed part of community survival. Freedom teaches quickly when the city insists on lessons every day. Leisure exists too, and it matters. Music in parlours and church basements, public lectures by black speakers and abolitionists, literary societies where men and women read essays aloud and debate serious questions, holiday parades, modest social gatherings with cake, coffee, laughter, and a fiddler if fortune allows, courtships carried out on sidewalks and at church doors, a mother saving for a ribbon, a father proud of a new coat bought after months of labour. These moments are not decorations around the main story. They are the main story as much as anything else, because they show what people do with the breathing room freedom gives them. Black newspapers and editors play a major role in turning local experience into public argument. They expose discrimination, celebrate achievement, demand rights, and interpret national events from a black perspective too often missing elsewhere. Reading such a paper can feel like stepping into a room where the truth is finally spoken without apology. Pages smell of ink and fresh print. Editorials crackle with urgency. Notices about meetings, schools, marriages, deaths, and lectures stitch scattered lives into a shared public. Print becomes belonging. At the same time, disappointment shadows Northern hopes in 1861. The Union fights to preserve itself, not yet explicitly to end slavery. White politicians praise the Constitution while moving cautiously around the moral catastrophe at its centre. Employers discriminate, public facilities segregate, voting rights remain restricted in many places. Even the free air can feel narrow when every doorway reminds you that equality is still under debate. You're free, but you're not fully welcomed. You belong, but your belonging is contested. You work, pay rent, pray, learn, organise, and contribute. Yet the society around you keeps asking whether your presence counts on equal terms, and still, black northern communities endure and create. They raise children with ambition. They train teachers and ministers. They publish, organise, protest, worship, and support one another. They build a civic life sturdy enough to matter in a nation reluctant to honour it. They also cultivate style, manners, humour, and pleasure, because dignity is not only defended in meetings, it is carried in how one dresses, hosts guests, sings, teaches, and refuses to disappear. So what are Northern dreams and Northern limits for black Americans in 1861? The dreams are substantial. Secure family life, education, paid work, civic influence, safety, citizenship. The limits are equally substantial. Racism in law, labour, housing, transport, and public regard. The North is not slavery, and that difference is immense, but it is not justice either. It is a place where possibility opens and then collides with prejudice again and again. You walk through city streets holding both facts at once. The buildings rise, the crowds surge, the papers rustle, church bells ring over neighbourhoods built by effort and faith. In that sound you hear not perfection, but persistence. And persistence, in such a country, is its own form of brilliance. By late 1861 the air feels different. Not calmer, certainly not kinder, but changed in some unmistakable way. The old order still stands in most places, armed and loud and cruelly confident. Enslaved people are still held in bondage by law. Free black communities still face insult, exclusion, and danger. Yet the nation has crossed into war, and war has a habit of loosening things that once seemed fixed forever. For black Americans, this first year of the Civil War does not deliver freedom in full. It does something subtler, and in some ways just as important. It makes change imaginable on a new scale. You feel it in movement first. Roads that once carried mostly wagons of crops and ordinary trade now fill with soldiers. Supply trains, horses, officers, refugees, and rumours. Camps rise near rail lines and crossroads. Drums rattle in the distance. Bugles cut through morning fog. Boots grind dust into the road and mud into everything else. Smoke from campfires drifts across fields and town edges, bringing the smell of bacon grease, wool, damp canvas, horse leather, and wood ash. The war has entered the physical landscape. It is no longer merely a matter of speeches in newspapers or names passed quietly in cabins. It has become a presence you can smell and hear. For enslaved people in areas touched by military movement, this change is especially significant. Armies bring disruption. Disruption brings uncertainty. Uncertainty can be dangerous, but it can also create openings. A master distracted by military duty may watch less carefully. A plantation's routines may become strained. Patrol patterns may change. Roads may grow busier, which means harder to read in some ways and easier to disappear into in others. Enslaved people do not need a formal proclamation to sense that the ground beneath slavery has become less stable. A structure built on force is still dangerous when shaken, but it is no longer calm. In May 1861, one of the first major signs of transformation appears at Fortress Monroe in Virginia. There, Union General Benjamin Butler refuses to return 3 enslaved men who have escaped to federal lines, declaring them contraband of war because they have been used to support the Confederate war effort. The language is cold and legalistic, and no one would mistake it for pure moral poetry, yet its consequences are immense. Word spreads that reaching Union lines may now offer some protection. The federal government has not abolished slavery. It has not yet fully embraced emancipation, but a crack has opened in practice, and black Americans notice immediately the term contraband is hardly flattering. It treats human beings as seized property under military logic, which is a rather clumsy compliment at best. Yet many enslaved people understand the deeper meaning. Union lines might become places of refuge. Federal forces might become something other than forces of slaveholders' claims. Possibility begins to take a physical shape. It may be incomplete, uncertain, and wrapped in bureaucratic language, but it exists. In wartime, even awkward possibility can change lives. As the months pass, more enslaved people in contested areas move toward Union positions. Some come alone, some come in family groups, some arrive at night exhausted, hungry, and terrified of being turned away. Others come in daylight because the collapse of local authority suddenly makes boldness reasonable. The scene at the edge of a Union camp can be tense and surreal. Soldiers stare, officers argue about rules, children cling to mothers' skirts, men carry bundles, cooking pots, blankets, tools, or nothing at all. Dogs bark, wheels creak, a baby cries. The smell of wet clothing and road dust hangs heavily in the air. A new kind of wartime community begins to form in these unsettled spaces. Conditions in contraband camps and makeshift refugee settlements are often harsh. Shelter is poor. Food can be insufficient. Disease spreads easily. Military authorities are inconsistent, generous in one place and suspicious in another. Some Union soldiers welcome fugitives. Others resent them or see them only as labourers. This is not a paradise waiting just beyond the picket line. Still, for many enslaved people, the chance to reach federal protection, however partial, represents a profound change. The Union Army has become a force people can move toward rather than only fear from afar. That shift in direction matters. A mainstream fact of 1861 is that the war begins to transform enslaved people from objects of policy into active agents of change. Not because white leaders suddenly become enlightened, but because black people themselves push events forward. They flee, they gather intelligence, they labour for Union forces under new conditions. They force federal officers and politicians to confront slavery as a military problem and a moral one. The war starts as a struggle to preserve the Union, but black action helps turn it toward emancipation. This does not happen all at once. It begins in scattered decisions made by people with muddy shoes and remarkable courage. Free black Americans in the North see these developments and press even harder. Black newspapers, ministers, lecturers, and community leaders argue that the war must strike slavery directly. They call for black military service, equal treatment, and recognition that the nation's future cannot be separated from black freedom. Meetings are held, petitions circulate, editorials appear, churches raise funds, families debate what the new policies may mean. The conversation becomes sharper now, more urgent. War has opened a door a little. Black Americans push at it with all the strength they have. By the autumn of 1861, Congress passes the First Confiscation Act, authorizing Union forces to seize enslaved people used in support of the Confederate war effort. Again, the language is cautious and tied to military logic. Again, the implications are large. The federal government is not merely talking around slavery now. It is beginning, however carefully, to undermine it. In August comes another important measure, the abolition of slavery in the District of Columbia, still several months away in the future. But debate has intensified, and the political direction is shifting. The old confidence of slaveholders no longer feels untouchable. Historians still argue over how fully enslaved people in all regions grasp the precise legal meaning of measures like contraband policy and confiscation in real time, because information travelled unevenly and often in distorted form. But the broader pattern is clear enough. Black Americans perceived that the war was making new things possible before many white policymakers were willing to say so openly. Enslaved communities often read the war not through legal texts, but through consequences. Were runaways being returned? Were Union troops taking in fugitives? Were owners nervous? Were patrols more frantic? These practical signs spoke loudly. Hope in such a moment is not simple. It does not stroll in with a smile and perfect confidence. It arrives mixed with grief, delay, and danger. A woman who hears that fugitives are reaching Union camps may feel her heart rise and sink in the same instant. Rise, because maybe there is now a road outward. Sink, because the road is long, watched, cold, and uncertain. A man on a plantation near military activity may begin measuring distances in his head, while knowing that one mistake could cost everything. A free black father in Philadelphia may read about new federal policy and feel vindication, anger, and impatience all at once. The future has begun to move, but it has not begun to hurry. In the South, Confederate leaders respond to this threat with greater anxiety and harsher control. The Confederacy depends on enslaved labor to feed armies, build fortifications, transport supplies, and sustain the civilian economy. White Southern confidence still fills speeches, but beneath it lies growing unease. What if enslaved workers withdraw labor where they can? What if they flee to the enemy? What if the very people slaveholders insist are loyal and content turn out to understand the war perfectly well? Such fears are not imaginary. They are embedded in the structure of the conflict. The Confederacy wants to build a nation on slavery while fighting a modern war. Black resistance exposes the contradiction daily. There are quieter transformations too. In some areas, enslaved people begin testing white authority more openly. Orders are questioned by delay. Information is withheld. Mobility expands in the confusion of wartime. Labor discipline frays. A person who once had to weigh every risk under a stable regime now weighs risks under an unstable one. That changes the calculation. Not every act becomes dramatic. Many remain subtle. But the psychology is shifting. The master's power, once presented as permanent and godlike, is beginning to look more contingent. Even the altered perception is powerful. Children experience this changing world in their own ways. They notice uniforms, camps, strange roads crowded with movement, adults speaking more urgently, and familiar routines breaking apart. A child may not understand legislation, but can understand that the grown-ups are listening in a new way. A little boy may stare wide-eyed at Union soldiers passing on a road. A girl may see her mother packing more carefully than usual and sense that something serious is underway. Children absorb tension through atmosphere long before anyone explains the map. Religious life takes on a deeper edge as well. Sermons and prayers increasingly carry the sense that history itself is being judged. The old biblical language of bondage and deliverance now seems less remote. In black churches and hidden gatherings, the thought that God may be working through war, however terrible, gains strength. This does not make suffering easier. It makes suffering interpretable. The sound of a hymn in late 1861 can hold something new in it. Not certainty, not triumph, but a sharpened expectation, like a door latch beginning to lift. One curious detail from wartime camps and border regions is that some newly arrived fugitives judged Union intentions less by official statements than by everyday behaviour. Did the soldiers share food? Did officers allow families to remain together? Was a person put to work, but still left unchained? Were names asked with respect or contempt? These practical observations became a kind of moral map. Policy could be confusing. Character revealed itself in bread, blankets, and whether a frightened child was treated gently. History often turns on such plain tests. Free black women continue to play crucial roles in this first flicker of transformation. They organise relief, gather clothing, teach displaced children, raise money, nurse the sick, and keep public pressure on the war effort's moral direction. Their work is often less celebrated than battlefield drama, yet it forms the human scaffolding of change. Men may debate policy in public halls, but women are often the ones making sure hungry people eat. Frightened people are clothed, and scattered communities do not come apart entirely. Transformation requires logistics as much as slogans. Black men, too, grow increasingly determined to claim a fighting role, even though official policy lags behind. The exclusion of black troops in 1861 feels more absurd as the war deepens and as black communities demonstrate unmistakable commitment to the Union cause and to emancipation. There is a growing sense that military service will come, not because white authority is generous, but because the logic of the war is pushing there. A nation fighting rebellion while refusing willing black defenders can maintain that contradiction only so long. What is changing most by the end of 1861 is not yet the law everywhere, nor the daily condition of all black Americans. It is the horizon. Freedom is no longer merely a moral argument made by abolitionists, a prayer whispered in brush arbours, or a rumour passing through the quarters. It has begun to appear in wartime practice, in federal confusion, in camp edges, in legislation, in newspaper debates, in the movement of human beings toward Union lines, and in the growing inability of the old system to keep its composure. The first flicker is not bright. It does not warm everyone equally. It can even be hard to see if you're far from the flame. But it is real. You can sense it in 1,000 small scenes. A family standing at the edge of a federal camp and not being turned back. A church meeting where people read the latest policy and fall silent with careful hope. An enslaved worker deciding that the master now looks more frightened than formidable. A free black editor sharpening his argument because the country can finally be forced to listen. A mother pressing her child's hand and wondering whether the impossible may have become merely difficult. These are not final victories. They are beginnings. And beginnings matter. Now the night can soften a little. The noise of marching men grows farther away. Campfires sink to embers, lamps lower in windows one by one. The smell of smoke thins into cool air, and the road at last lies quiet under a patient sky. You can let the year rest around you as it is, unfinished and uncertain, but no longer motionless. So many people have carried fear through these months. So many have worked, waited, prayed, listened, and dared to believe in changes not yet fully visible, in cabins, churches, city rooms, and rough camps beside the army. Black Americans have kept alive something larger than policy. They have kept alive the insistence that freedom belongs to them in truth, whether the nation admits it yet or not. You can almost feel that insistence settling into the dark like a steady heartbeat, not loud, not boastful, just present. The old world has not disappeared, the dangers remain real, yet the future has begun to answer back. Somewhere a child sleeps beside a mother who has heard one hopeful rumour too many to dismiss them all. Somewhere a father stares into dying coals and imagines a road he might soon take. Somewhere a hymn drifts upward, quiet and worn and full of patience. The first light is faint, but it is there. And with that gentle thought, you can let the long, troubled year fade into silence, into darkness, into rest.